Today. We're going to be in Daniel 7. Before we do that, please pray with me. Father, we thank you for you, for your Son, for the Holy Spirit. Who have we in heaven but you? And we don't deserve you, but we are grateful and welcome your mercy and your grace. We thank you for the faith that you have given us. We thank you for you putting the hunger for your word inside each and every one of us. We thank you for the spiritual growth in each and every one of our lives. We ask that you would let this just be the beginning. Help us to continue to grow in Christ-likeness. Help us to grow in our faith and in our trust in you. Help us to let go of the things of this world and hold tightly to the life to come, the life with you in heaven forever and ever and ever, where we'll be with each other, worshiping you and enjoying your presence and each other's company for all time. What a wonderful promise that is. Lord, help us to see your word as what it is. It is how you have spoken to us, how you revealed yourself to us. It's how you speak to us today, chapter and verse. So be with us. Help us to understand your word more. Give us greater wisdom of your word, and help us to not just hear it, but do it too, so that we might be good ambassadors of Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Daniel 7. We'll see how far we get through this today. This is Daniel's vision of the four beasts. And this is going to say, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon's reign, this is a vision that came to Daniel after the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, but before the Babylonian Empire was conquered by the Medo-Persians. So it says in verse 1, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. This is just for timeline's sake. This is 553 BC, 14 years before the big feast when Cyrus comes and conquers Babylon. Daniel chapter 1 through 6 talks about the life and times of Daniel. Chapter 7 through 12 describes visions that Daniel had. This is going to be a dream or a vision that moves well into the future, talking about the coming of the Lord, his second advent, when he comes to rule and to reign and establish his kingdom. He had a vision, it says. It's one of four visions that is described in Daniel 7 through 12. Daniel could have given us lots of detail. The Holy Spirit led him along just like he led Peter and Paul and the rest of the authors of Scripture along, because God himself is the full and true author of every single book of the Bible. So he gives us exactly what he wants to, no more, no less. So we have an all-sufficient source of what God has done, what God is doing, and what God will do. So we remember that as we move to verse 2. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. So this is nearby the Mediterranean Sea, no doubt to them the biggest sea that they knew of the time. So there's a reason there. It's being stirred up. The sea is generally used also as a symbolic picture of the Gentile or unbelieving nations, or the unbelieving people. So you can think of that as well. So not only is it possibly referring to the Mediterranean, it can be referring to symbolically the picture of Gentile nations or unbelieving people, the sea. The sea is calamitous, right? It's always up and down. It's not peaceful and calm and settled, no. The people of God are peaceful, calm, and settled, but the people of the world are like the sea, tumultuous. This is being stirred up, the idea of chaos. The four winds of heaven. This can be described as the full encompassing power of God. Four great beasts come up from this sea, come up from the chaos and the tumult of the world. Four large, ferocious animals emerged, and each one is different from another. This harkens back to what we saw in Daniel chapter 2. These beasts representing different empires, and that's the same here. Verse 4 in Daniel 7. The first beast was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, Arise, and devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, just stopping there, the first one was like a lion and an eagle, majestic, kingly, right? Kings and lions, or eagles and lions, are kind of representative of kings. They are vicious, they are powerful, they are kingly. This is descriptors used by Jeremiah, used by Ezekiel to describe Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom of Babylon. But in spite of the majesty kind of describing this beast, it's a lion, it's like an eagle, it has wings, we see that it's been humbled because its wings are plucked off. Its wings are plucked off and made human, made to stand on 2 feet, right? And a man's mind and heart were given to it. What does that hearken you back to? Do you remember a certain king who was a little too proud, who was walking along on the top of his palace saying, Oh, this great Babylon that I have made. Oh, look at how great Babylon is. Aren't I the best? Aren't I the bomb diggity? Right? And he was humbled. He was humbled. And he was made for a time to be like a beast. The mind of a beast and act like a beast, walking around in the dewy grass, eating grass like an oxen, until God restored his mind, picked him up and set him on 2 feet, made him like a man again, gave him a man's heart and mind. That is what this is referring to. A little later in Daniel 7, we'll see that Daniel tells us that these 4 beasts are the 4 kingdoms ruling over the earth. They don't rule over the earth at the same time. So this is talking about a succession. Kingdoms that come one after another. The first kingdom is the Babylonian Empire, represented by the lion and the eagle. And it fits well with Nebuchadnezzar's reign. It's also interesting to note that winged lions were used to line the entrances of the Babylonian Empire. There are even some on display in the British Museum today. So it fits perfectly. A second beast was like a bear. Didn't have this majestic look of the lion or the eagle, just a bear. Slow, strong, crushing. Bears, when they are hungry, are vicious. They have an insatiable appetite. This beast is told to arise and devour much flesh. The bear represents the Medo-Persian Empire. You know, the ones who came and sacked Babylon. Cyrus. This is what succeeded the Babylonian Empire. The greater side and ribs are basically referring to its conquests. This is a bear that conquests, this empire has taken over much territory, much conquest. Slow and crushing. They were large armies that just moved and overwhelmed with force. Arise and devour much flesh. They were not only conquering, but they were cruel. After this comes a leopard. Like a leopard. Leopards are known for sudden and unexpected attacks. A leopard doesn't say, meow, meow, I'm about to attack. A leopard just attacks. Suddenly, quickly. The idea is swiftness. So if you have a lion and an eagle are meant to majesty and power, and then you have a bear, which is just crushing ferociousness, and then you have a leopard, swift and unexpected. This one would be especially swift because it has 4 wings. Of course, this is symbolic. Leopards don't have wings. Okay? This is symbolic, meaning to tell you that this leopard, who's already ferocious and swift, is even more swift than usual because it has 4 wings. Also has 4 heads, which is representative of a couple different things. 4 heads could mean 4 times as clever, because you're more clever with 4 heads put together than with just 1. It can also be referring to the fact that because this leopard represents the Greek Empire, it could be representing what happens to it at its end. So the leopard is known for swift, sudden attacks. All these animals we've talked about so far are mighty. Each one of them go after its prey, but each one of them go after its prey in a different way. Each one has its own kind of unique calling card. The lion devours, a bear will crush, the leopard springs upon its prey quickly. And again, the leopard represents the Greek Empire. Babylonian Empire, Medo-Persian Empire, Greek Empire. Okay? In the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great conquered the known world very quickly, swiftly, like a leopard if it had 4 wings. This is the idea. Okay? This is the idea. After Alexander the Great's death, his huge kingdom was divided into, guess how many parts? 4 parts. And how many heads does the leopard have? 4 heads, okay? I mean, the accuracy of which this prophecy lines up with what we know of history is 100%. You don't have to sit there and shamefully say, well, it only matches this or that. No, it's perfect. It's perfect. These 4 generals of Alexander the Great inherited his domain after his death. The Babylonian Empire dominated in Daniel's day, but in Alexander the Great's day, it was Greece. And when he died, separated into 4 sections, each one of his 4 greatest generals getting a portion. How could Daniel know what was going to happen? I mean, Daniel was alive in the Babylonian reign and a little bit of the Medo-Persian, right? How could Daniel know what the next world empire would be like? Not only that, sure, you could give a little credit. Okay, Babylonian, sure, he was alive for that. Medo-Persian, sure, he was there when Cyrus conquers Babylon. Okay, it makes sense. Okay, explain to me how Daniel knows about Greece and about Alexander the Great. And we're not even done yet, okay? He's going to go one further. There's only one way that he would be able to know this. It's because God showed him this, and God knows the future. And he is God. And it shouldn't surprise us that God knows everything. And it shouldn't surprise us that God decides to reveal certain things to his prophets who are his mouthpiece. Okay? Now, let me take this moment to tell you that there are no longer prophets of God who are hearing from him directly, sharing with you, oh, God told me this, God told me that. This is closed and this is done. God spoke through the prophets back in this day. But then he chose to speak through Jesus Christ in finality. And then the people that Jesus rose up as his apostles were the final ones to write. And then the book is closed by John in the book of Revelation. Do not add to it. Do not subtract from it. Don't add to it, or else the plagues will be added to you that were in this book. Don't subtract to it, or else your name will be subtracted from the book of life. Okay? Big warning. Big warning. Telling you that everything is done. The bookend of God's word is finished. Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, it's all done, it's all encapsulated, it's all finished. So what we're reading here is talking about past events, and it's also going to talk about future events, foretold by God. We don't need anything else. If somebody says that God told me, you should say chapter and verse, please. God told me this. Well, great. What chapter and verse is that again? God lives outside the domain of our time. He can see the future. He can see the past. He's not limited like we are. He sees all of human history. So it should not surprise us that the God who can do anything tells us about everything and gives us, in his all-sufficient way, just enough information to be able to get through this life serving him well. If he hasn't given us that information, we don't need it, is what I'm trying to say. And if he's given us that information, we need it. Peter says in 2 Peter 1:19, we have the prophetic word more fully confirmed. You would do well to heed as a light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your heart. Peter said that in reference to, he was on the Mount of Transfiguration with James and John. He sees Jesus in glory. He sees Elijah. He sees Moses. That's a pretty major event. I would guess that if that happened to you, you'd be posting about it on Facebook and Instagram that same day. It was a big event. Right? Peter, referring to this event, is saying, we have the prophetic word more fully confirmed. As I point to my Bible, that's what he's referring to. That God's word is even more fully confirmed than any experience that somebody can tell you about. Daniel 7, verse 7. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast. So we've had Babylon, we've had Medo-Persia, we've had Greece, represented by a lion and eagle, a bear, and a leopard. Now a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel has a hard time describing this beast. This fourth beast is indescribable. It's uniquely horrific and terrifying in its power and in its conquest. Doing his best to describe it. There's no such thing that exists that he can use to point to it, right? He's used a bear, he's used a lion, he's used eagles and leopards. This one, he does not have an animal to point to. He doesn't say it's like a hippo with a giraffe with a helicopter. He doesn't take anything, or a chariot. He can't describe it. He can't describe it. This is a unique beast. It does, however, point to the Roman Empire because iron is mentioned. And if you remember back in Daniel 2, iron was mentioned in reference to the Roman Empire. Even though the Roman Empire fell apart in the late 400s, it lived on in a divided sense, which you now know as most of Europe. It will be revived. It will return in a form of unified strength near the time of Christ's second coming. Then it will be comprised of the 10 parts under kings, as well as an 11th king who will be the Antichrist. If you remember back in Daniel 2, it talked about the feet of the statue being mixed with clay and with iron, and the 10 toes. Okay, that's what this is referencing here. There is an unmistakable correspondence between these horns and the 10 toes of the dream image in Daniel chapter 2. And again, the mention of iron in both places links them together. It says another horn, a little one, with a mouth that speaks great things or pompous words. When you think of great things, you're tempted to think like, oh, great things, like these things that I'm hearing are great. No, think of pompousness, right? Pompous words. Among the 10 horns, 3 are replaced by one that is more dominant than they. They are plucked out by their roots and replaced by this one little horn, which has intelligence, it has eyes like the eyes of a man, and it speaks boastful or pompous words. This is the rise of the Antichrist. Verse 9. This is going to start talking about the Ancient of Days. Hopefully you know who that is. That is not the Antichrist. This is the true Christ. He says, as I looked, verse 9 in Daniel 7, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Now let me just, context, okay? Real quick before I keep reading on. Context. Daniel is talking about the dream and the vision that he's having, and so far, he's been going in concrete sequential order. Yes? Agree? Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, right? That's concrete sequential order. What's the very next thing he talks about? He talks about Rome, he talks about the Antichrist, and what comes right after that? Ancient of Days. Jesus Christ. him coming back. So the order of earthly events is kingdom of Babylon, kingdom of Medo-Persia, kingdom of Greece, kingdom of Rome, a reestablished kingdom of Rome underneath the Antichrist, and then the kingdom of the Ancient of Days. Get it? As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. This is the order of earthly events. Please note that we are closer to the end than we are to the beginning. Daniel's vision flashes forward to Jesus' divine throne, to the throne of God, where judgment will come. The final kingdom, where the final king takes and judges everything else. That's going to happen. That's going to happen. Notice how the description of the throne room of God sounds very similar to what we just were talking about in our study in heaven, yes? Fiery flames, moving to and fro, indescribable power and judgment. Note that when Daniel's vision here, he's describing thrones, right? But he didn't see anybody sitting on those thrones. When you go to the Apostle John's writing in Revelation, he describes heaven and he describes thrones around the throne of God, but he describes those who sat on the throne as those thrones as 24 elders. Yes? So you say in Revelation, John mentions not only the thrones, but the 24 thrones, but the 24 elders that are sitting on those thrones. Daniel only mentions the thrones. Daniel makes no mention of the elders because the 24 elders represent the church. And Daniel didn't know about the church, did he? That was a mystery that had not been revealed to him yet. An unrevealed mystery to the Old Testament saints. They didn't know about the New Testament church. So it would make sense that he would see thrones, but not the 24 elders on them, because he would have no absolute idea as to what they would be representing. But John would, wouldn't he? And so he does give us a more full picture in Revelation. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat? That's just hidden in there. It's just a little tidbit hidden in there that you'd miss. The Ancient of Days is seated there. God. His throne was a fiery flame, a brilliant manifestation of God's splendor, his power, the fierceness of his judgment. God loves fiercely. He judges fiercely. Isaiah 66, verses 15 through 16, describes the judgment of God in terms of fire. God's throne, for believers, you have nothing to fear, right? Before God's throne, you have nothing to fear. But you stand in reverential awe, don't you, of the power, and you stand in reverential awe of his judgment and his wrath. Listen to what Isaiah 66, verses 15 through 16 says. For behold, the Lord will come with fire and with his chariots and like a whirlwind to render his anger with fury and his rebuke with the flames of fire. This sounds very similar to what we're seeing here when the Ancient of Days comes to establish his kingdom. For by fire and by his sword the Lord will judge all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. This is why you share the gospel, people. This is what you're warning them from. The Christmas message is going to be, who is Jesus to you? Okay? Who is Jesus to you? There's many people who will affirm, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. But who is Jesus to you, and why are you celebrating Christmas? Are you celebrating Christmas and celebrating Jesus because Jesus is a savior of you from your sins? Or are you celebrating Jesus because he gives you your best life now? Do you see what I'm saying? This is why we share the gospel. This is what we use to warn people. I don't use the gospel to say life is hard and Jesus can help. No, that is not the gospel. The gospel is that we are wretched sinners in the hands of an angry God. And you must be made right with him before it's too late. Because you don't want to be in the whirlwind of his fiery judgment. That's why it's in there. That's why we use it because it should invoke fear, and the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. The seeking out of how to be made right with God because you fear his judgment. For behold, the Lord will come with fire. This will happen. With chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger and fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. That's the lake of fire. For by fire and by his sword the Lord will judge all flesh. Nobody gets away. So you either have Jesus or you've got nothing. Someone must take the wrath of God's anger. It will either be Jesus on your behalf or you. The slain of the Lord shall be many. This is why we share the gospel. Do you see how the gospel is all throughout Scripture? I mean, you realize we're in Daniel 7, right? You realize we're in Daniel 7. You realize that we're in Daniel 7 referencing Isaiah, and we're talking about the gospel. Okay? It's not just New Testament. It's the whole Bible, from New Testament all the way back to Old Testament, from Genesis to Revelation. It's all about God, his glory, and his redeeming work through Christ. This is just talking about God's redemptive plan and why we need that redemptive plan. It talks about wheels like a burning fire. It talks about thousands and thousands upon thousands ministering to him. This is the angels. Remember what we talked about in our reading in Luke 2:14, right? Thousands of angels beyond counting. You can't count that high. Even with an abacus. You can't get to the number of angels that are ministering around the throne of God. It is meant to show not only his glory, but his power and his authority. Who would be foolish enough to stand against this God? Well, just about every single person on earth. That's who. You and me too. Because before God saved us, we were foolish enough to stand against such a holy God. Even though he sits on this fiery throne, even though he's surrounded by a myriad of angels, we know better. It's my way or the highway, God, right? Until he breaks you and saves you. And then you finally submit to him and acknowledge him as God. A God who is surrounded by 10,000 times 10,000 standing before him. That's humanity standing before him for judgment. Numerous angels surrounding the throne and the multitude of humanity standing before the throne in judgment. The court was seated and the books were opened. You think? Here's a terrifying thought that is at the same exact time a comforting thought. Okay, let's see if you follow me. There are books. Everything that's happening, everything that has happened, everything you do, think, and say has been written down. There are books. So here's the terrifying thought. There are books that have written down everything that we've said, thought, and done. That's terrifying. It's terrifying to those who have not been set free from Christ, who gives us the promise of Romans 8:1, that now, therefore, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So now I don't have to fear those books like somebody who does not have Christ does. So now those books are a comfort to me because I understand that no one gets away with anything. Vengeance is his, says the Lord. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry that is God going to forget something? Is God going to take care of this? Is he going to tie up that loose end? Yes. Yes, he's going to tie up that loose end through grace and mercy or through judgment. And you can rest easy, knowing that God will do that. There's the book of the living mentioned in Psalm 69. There's the book of remembrance mentioned in Malachi 3. There's the book of life, which every name written in that is a name of a believer that God will save or has saved. Comforting to us who have put our faith and trust in him, thanks to him first giving us faith and loving us first so that now we love him. Comforting to us to know that there's such books. But to someone who is against Almighty God, to someone who is not submitting to him, to someone who is not putting their faith and trust in God, a terrifying truth. That you will have to make account for every single thing because God has kept account of every single thing. This is the reason for the gospel. Hey, do you know that God is keeping account of everything? Now, this doesn't work for everybody, right? You don't just walk up to some guy in Dollar General and go, hey, Did you know God's keeping account of everything? You need the gospel, right? That's not how it happens. But if you're talking to a friend and they go, hey, I don't really feel like there's a God and I don't feel like I'll have to do anything or answer for anything like that, you can say, do you know that God says that he keeps books of remembrance, books of the living? So he knows every single thing that's going on. You're going to have to answer for that someday. And maybe, just maybe, God will use that moment to put a tinge of fear in their heart, whether they reveal it to you or not, right? And again, fear is the beginning of wisdom, because it's the first beginning of saying, I am not right with God. I'm afraid of God. I'm not right with him. How do I get right with him? And that's what leads people to the true gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the only way, the only truth, the only life, and the only way to get to being right with God. Verse 11, Daniel 7. I looked then because the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. Again, pompous words, not great words like, oh, this is so great. No, self-indulgent, pompous words. I looked then because the sound of the great pompous words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. This is describing a great transition from earthly human dominion to divine dominion. From when mankind is ruling and dominion over the world to when Christ comes in his perfectness to rule over the world. This is that transition time. When the Son of Man, the Ancient of Days, comes and exercises dominion over all the earth, he succeeds the reign of the final fourth beast. So again, concrete sequential order, right? This isn't confusing. First beast, second beast, third beast, fourth beast. Son of Man, Jesus Christ, comes back. The end. It's not confusing. It's not confusing. Here, the little horn of the fourth beast again speaks those pompous words. This is the Antichrist. This is going to be part of his characteristic. The little horn represents the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, if you want to have what's he going to be like? What's he going to be like? Right? If he was to be identified, what's one of his characteristics? Well, one of his characteristics is going to be that all the things coming out of his mouth, boastful. Right? Boastful. Pompous. Blasphemous. Oh, great words coming out of his mouth. This is going to be part of his characteristic. I watched till the beast was slain. The rest of the beasts had their dominion taken away. The fourth beast is destroyed, and the others may continue, but without the dominion of their own. When Jesus sets up his kingdom, the empire of the Antichrist will be completely crushed. But there will still be factions and little things that continue on until Christ's reign. But not the Antichrist. That's the point that's being made here. The fourth beast is destroyed. He's destroyed at Christ's second coming. That's the idea back in Daniel 2 of the stone that was cut out from the mountain, not cut with human hands, coming and crushing the statue. As it went through history, each preceding beast lost its dominance as the next beast came, right? Babylon had its prominence. It lost its prominence when the Medo-Persians came. Medo-Persia lost its prominence as the Greeks came. You see that happening here. They were all kind of, though, brought together in some form or shape, surviving in some form or shape, although not having the dominion that they had before, right? It's not like Greece just obliterated off the earth. It's not like Rome just obliterated off the earth. It's not like Babylon just obliterated off the earth. Descendants and parts and pieces of those kingdoms still remained a little bit here and there, right? And that's what's being saying here. That the second advent comes near. All three of these empires and their descendants are going to be a part of this final form of the Roman phase, right? The clay and the iron and its remixing and the 10 toes. Christ is going to utterly destroy it, and he's going to utterly replace this kingdom and those kingdoms all before it with his own. So if you take anything away from this whole last part, it would be that Christ comes last, Christ takes over, he obliterates everything else. There's no contest. There's no contest. Let's do one more section here. The Son of Man is given dominion. Verse 13, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. This is the end. This is the last kingdom, folks. And notice here it says, I saw in the night visions, behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. This is one being coming to another being, right? Who's the Son of Man? Jesus. And he's coming to the Ancient of Days, God the Father, on the throne. And he's presented before God the Father, and God the Father gives Jesus dominion, glory, kingdom. All peoples, nations, languages shall serve him, and his dominion is an everlasting one which shall not pass away, and his kingdom shall not be destroyed. This is God the Father coronating God the Son. The title of Son of Man is one that Jesus used. Listen to this part. This is a good spot to kind of wrap up on. All right. Do you remember, as you read through the New Testament, when Jesus would refer to himself, he would say, the Son of Man, the Son of Man, the Son of Man, right? Do you remember that? Does that tickle your brain at all? That Jesus would call himself the Son of Man. All right. Now, when you hear Jesus call himself the Son of Man, no doubt you first drift to, well, he is the Son of Man and he's also God. So he's truly God and he's truly man. So when he calls himself the Son of Man, he's just identifying with his humanness, right? While at the same time acknowledging his deity, right? So that's no doubt a part of what you think when you hear Jesus refer to himself as the Son of Man. And you'd be right, okay? But you're not fully right. There's another part to it, and this is the other part to it. When Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, he is pointing directly to Daniel 7 here. He is pointing directly to Daniel 7 here. What's so cool about that, you might say? Well, what's the context of what is being talked about here in Daniel 7 when Son of Man is brought up? His glorification, his coronation, his victory, his setup of his eternal kingdom forever and ever and ever. So when Jesus refers to himself as Son of Man, he's designating himself here at this time that was foretold by Daniel. Do you see? So Jesus says the Son of Man will be lifted up. Yeah, he's right. Yes, he's fully God, or he's truly God, and he's truly man. But when he says Son of Man, he's also referencing Daniel 7 and his coming rule and reign and victory. How cool is that? How cool is that? Nobody catches that in the time. Like in the moment, nobody's catching that Jesus is saying that about himself. Nobody said, well, wait a minute. Didn't Daniel say something about Son of Man? And Jesus keeps calling himself. Nobody said that in the moment, okay? We get the privilege of seeing and understanding that here and now. How cool is that? How cool is that? This highlights God's divinity, Christ's victory. And Christ is talking about his victory the whole time he's referring to himself as the Son of Man. Every time you read the New Testament now and Jesus calls himself Son of Man, I want your brains to immediately lock back in on what's being talked about here in Daniel 7. His coming victory and reign, and his kingdom will be forever and ever, shall never pass away, never be destroyed. It was a favorite self-designation of Jesus. I'm pretty sure that it's used over 75 times in the Gospels. That's his favorite designation of himself. How cool is that? He receives all the dominion from all the kingdoms, so everything that once belonged to somebody else, it's all his. Everything is his. Permanently his. It's everlasting dominion. Everlasting dominion. It shall not pass away. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. And this kingdom is everything. This kingdom is everything. That all the peoples, nations, and languages shall serve him. This is a greater kingdom than all the other ones that came before it. Yes, yes. An everlasting dominion, it shall not pass away, and it shall never be destroyed. This is the promise of a kingdom ruled by Christ, one that starts out earthly and merges into heavenly. And that's what we have to look forward to. Please join me in prayer as we close. Father, as we stop in the middle of our look at Daniel 7, how encouraging, how awesome. This is what I want from my God. I want my God to be thinking on levels that I can't even comprehend. I want my God to be more powerful than I can even fathom. I want my God to be mighty and in control and sovereign. And boy, you show us that here in Daniel 7, that you are in control, that you have set up these kingdoms and you will knock them down. And in the end, you will set up your own kingdom for your Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior, our Lord, our God, our King. And his kingdom shall never end and shall be forever and ever, and we'll be there with him and with each other forever and ever. So if we know the end, we can handle everything that's happening between now and then because we know what we have to look forward to. So thank you that you have given us a peek into what your plan is and will be. And we can look forward to all these things happening, all these things that already have happened. Show us that we can rely on and trust you to be faithful to complete all these other things that are yet to happen. Help us to lean on that, Lord, and keep putting our faith and trust in you as we look forward to these days described here in Daniel 7, especially the days when you will reign forever and ever and we will be with you. We thank you for these promises in Jesus' name. Amen.